Hi, this is Thomas with Cozy Grammar, speaking to you from my cozy writing yurt for another session of Ask Cozy Grammar. These are sessions that we hold live and then record so that people can review the answers that I give them afterwards. So what I'd like to do is dive right in with our first question, which comes from Komal, who writes, "My 10-year-old and my 7-year-old have not developed writing skills. They have thought processes or processes, but they can't really articulate them. They just run away from writing and they never seem to want to do it." So I want to say that I appreciate this question enormously, Komal. It's a great question. How do we develop writing skills in young people? How do we encourage people to write, especially if for whatever reason they might have some kind of resistance to writing? They may see it as a kind of task or chore that they have to do. And of course, anything that we think we have to do suddenly takes on a weight. That we may not like the feeling of, even if it's just something, even if that weight or that perception of it being a chore is just in our heads. So I'd like to offer three suggestions for ways to make writing more playful and make it seem less like a chore, because it doesn't have to be a chore, because I think this is one of the best ways to encourage and develop writing skills, especially in young people. So here are my three suggestions. First, make writing a game. For example, I'll give you an example. So that rather than it being a kind of task that one has to do, it becomes something kind of surprising and intriguing and fun to try out. So if you have, I notice you have two kids that you've mentioned in your question. So if you're working with two kids, you can have them think. Each of them can think of some noun. So this could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a thing, and then they describe that person, place, or thing in writing without naming what it is. So each student would do this, and then they would trade their pages and see if they can guess what the other person was writing about. So, for example, one of my teaching assistants is my froggy. So if I were doing this activity with somebody else, I might think about, how do I describe this frog, this stylized frog head, my froggy, without using the word frog or froggy. So I might talk about the color green. I might talk about its eyes and how the eyes, you might see these eyes peering up out of the surface of the water. Or I might talk about the the mouth, that this noun has a mouth that might make sounds that you might hear, say, at night walking along the road, and so on. So I would think of as many ways to describe the frog without actually saying what it is, describing its characteristics, its how it looks, how it behaves, where it lives, maybe even telling a story about it. And my only challenge is to do so in writing. So I write all of that down, and then my partner would do so, and then we'd trade and see if we can guess. This is just one example of how you can turn a writing activity into more of a playful and game-like activity. Here is a second suggestion. If your kids are willing to try this, or if you'd like to try this with your kids, try having them make up stories out loud. You might give them some sort of prompt or seed idea, like, tell me a story about the friendship between two carrots, or tell me a story about what the turnip said to the rabbit that was trying to eat it, and anything like that. And here's the key, is that we are often more spontaneous when we are speaking out loud without thinking, oh dear, now I have to write something. So what we do is we have the person who's listening, this might be you, this might be the other student, have them be a scribe and have them write down what the other person says as best they can, and then switch roles. Then the other person tells a story spontaneously. Maybe it's with the same idea for the story, or maybe it's a completely different story. Maybe it starts with a given prompt, or maybe it comes completely from their imagination. It just depends on what seems to work best for your kids. And then they write a story, and the other person, or I should say, they write a story out loud. They tell a story spontaneously out loud, and the other person writes down what they hear. And then they trade their stories and they read what do their stories look like, written down, having said them out loud. And this kind of activity can do a wonderful job of bridging the distance between our spontaneous creativity out loud and our creativity on the page, on paper. Because the more we can um, shorten this distance, the more spontaneous and creative our writing will become. And the more informed our spontaneous speech will become by what we learn by writing. Here's my third suggestion. And this is something that just occurred to me yesterday when I was thinking about your question. One other, it's really an example of a kind of writing prompt, the sort of thing you might suggest to your students to do, which would be have them tell or write the life story of an everyday object. For example, here's my pencil. I prefer as much as possible to write by hand and with pencil when I can, although, of course, like all of us, I need to use the computer from time to time. But I might tell the life story of this particular pencil. Where did it come from? Where did it get assembled? What sort of journey did it take to get to the store where I happened to chance upon it and decide, oh, I like this pencil because it's a wood color rather than a yellow color, or whatever the case might be. Um, this kind of activity allows us to be more free because we're not thinking, oh, now I'm writing something. We're now involved in the act of creation and the act of imagination. Oh, I'm imagining the life story of an object that I may have had around my desk or around my house for a long time, but maybe I never thought, what would it like to be a pencil? When I was a student, maybe a little bit younger than 7 years old, like your younger student, your younger kid here, I got to do a creative writing activity in the school that I was going to, where we had to imagine the life stories of objects, like a cotton ball was one of them, an old shoe was another one, and a paperclip was the third one. And I still have this book. And in fact, I still remember these stories because of course, I had to do lots of writing activities in school, but none of them stayed with me. None of them were memorable to me, except for this one, because I'd never been asked to imagine the life story of a paperclip, or an old shoe, or a piece of cotton before. So, Komal, those are three suggestions that I have for you. I hope that they help you in exploring different ways to encourage your students to explore writing in a creative and playful manner. If you have any other questions, please feel to write to me at cozygrammar.com. I'd be happy to elaborate further. Thank you.